Folks, welcome back to the TRE podcast. Matt Salesio here. We're joined in-house by Marc Champagne. Marc, thanks for coming on the show, man.
It's a pleasure. I love our setup. It's good to see other humans in the flesh. I do a lot of virtual stuff, obviously, as you know, and nothing beats in person, though.
No, even the conversation, like online is great, but to come have that energy, we were shooting this shit before, like it just elevates the whole experience for our listeners and us, you know?
I agree, and we need more of it. We definitely need more of it.
So to dive in, I want to start out with how we're going to lay this episode out. So I wanted to really educate listeners about what it means to live a truly optimized life, how they can personalize it for themselves, and how they can start optimizing their mind first, and why that's really essential before doing anything else. I like to ask my guests all the time too, do you have an intention for going into this episode today for our listeners? Anything come up for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, there's always one kind of core intention, and that is just to make what I call mental fitness and these practices more accessible to as many people as possible, and help people that are watching or listening see, oh, okay, that's like, I can try that. Like, that's where I can, bring in a small little, like a micro tweak to my routine or the way that I'm thinking about something, or way to optimize in a certain way. Just like the subtlest of changes, because that's where we're consistent. When it's not like we're blowing up our life and completely changing everything, it's those small tweaks. So if I can bring that to anyone on the other side, then I'll feel pretty good.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Now let's get into the nitty gritty right off the bat. Then, what does it mean to self-optimize? Like, let's just get on the same page here.
I had to really think about that, because until I met you, I mean, I've thought about optimization, of course, but like, you've really pushed me to think about that question in particular, because I feel like on my side, like my lens is always around mental fitness. And if I zoom out of that, self-optimization is really doing everything possible to set up our external environment and internal environment to get us to a certain desired state or goal.
Interesting.
And the most important thing being, because this is where I see even companies, like, what is the desired state and goal? Usually we can think of the goal, but like, how do I want to feel when I get there is probably the biggest question to start with, because then you can reverse engineer the whole path.
Yeah, so let's get into that reverse engineer, because we spoke about that right before we hopped on the mics, which was very interesting. And I know you were saying it was something about your future self. What was that quote again that you said before reverse engineering that? Yeah,
it was what we were talking about is just two kind of fundamental questions. The one question I've asked almost 400 people now is, who are you? Which is the present day, strip away the titles and all of that, but like, who is Marc, like at the core? And that evolves over time as our life evolves and so forth, even though there are through lines, of course. But then the second big question is who am I optimizing to become, or who do I want to become? Because we're always evolving to something. Like, I don't know about you, but I've never met, an interesting human being or someone that's done a whole lot of good for the world, had a lot of impact, and said, yeah, I'm done, I'm good right here. Like, you're always striving to evolve and be better. And that's how we have survived over, years and years, right? So we're always doing that, but we just don't typically ask that last question of like, what is that desired state? We can put materialistic things there easily, right? Like, I want to have this house, I want to be here, I want to live at this location and so forth. But how do I actually want to feel, and how do I want to wake up feeling or show up for myself and others around me is the thing that I think fuels all of it.
Yeah.
And that's where the optimization part comes in, where you're either, and I learned this from James Clear around, he's well known for habits, right? And creating and breaking habits. And it's all around understanding, well, I'm either doing this thing to get me closer to that path, or it's moving me farther away.
There's no in between. It's either closer or further away.
Typically. Yeah, it's pretty binary.
I like the clarity aspect of what you were saying there. I feel like a lot of people, they feel maybe directionless in their life, or they're pursuing something that has been imposed on by them, whether society, parental, like we all know what we've, been shuttled down into. And having that clarity, for me, even looking at my business, it allows you to understand which actions to deliberately take every day to make that process to that end goal much faster.
Yeah.
Right. You're not just trying things out hoping to see what sticks. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. But we do that. We do that with our inner world often. And this is why for me, like I don't consider myself a coach or definitely not a therapist. I'm a strategist by training in the business world, which is what you're talking about. Like we don't typically just go out and say, hey, let's just try this out with any kind of plan. There's some sort of direction and a strategy. Then there are tactics that support that strategy. And then we pause, usually quarterly or maybe monthly, definitely yearly, and we see what works and what hasn't worked. And then we adjust the plan. So why don't we do that for ourselves in our minds? Exact same flow, right? Like, where do I want to be? What does that look like? What does that feel like? Who's around me? And what can I do daily to get me to that place, right? And we have to, like the biggest part of the formula that I see missing is we're pretty good at taking action, some more than others, of course, but for the most part, we all kind of understand that. It's like action will lead to results in some capacity, right? It's the first part of what I would say the equation, which is contemplation or stilling the mind, thinking, because that's where if you take some time to pause, for me, that's first cup of coffee is brewing in the morning, just checking in with myself. How do I feel today? If I don't feel great, well, why? There's something fueling that. And then often I usually have some sort of Stoic philosophy, like a book leaning against the coffee machine. So I'll read literally a page just to completely to reset the perspective. And this all takes minutes, but it's all that check-in period to get data, just like what we do in a business, to then course correct so that we don't get to this moment. In business, it's the business is failing. Usually something financially is not working out or so forth. In life, it's like, how did I get here? And I hit a wall. And I'm doing something, I'm working in a job or I'm in a relationship with someone that is so now obviously wrong, but there's been clues along the way. And that's where the check-ins, where I find if we could do more of that, we'd just be a hell of a lot happier.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And on that topic of data, it's very synonymous with what you said, those clues that have been really sprinkled out through whatever you're going through, business, relationships, personal health. I love the intentionality of introspection and really gathering your own data, because I feel like a lot of us really don't do that. I was at a breathwork workshop not too long ago.
Okay.
And the way she started it, she goes, we're going to close our eyes, we're going to do a body scan. And I was like, very interesting. What is this? Very synonymous with what you just said. We're going through our body. Where is it tight? Where are you feeling achy? Where are you feeling a little blocked? She used that word blocked. And it was it paused me for a second to go, what does that mean blocked?
Yeah.
I understood I was tight in the jaw. I was shortness of breath in the chest. And then she goes, okay, great. Now you know where to focus on your body. What do you thinking in your day-to-day, what would be contributing to that? And then stuff just starts to fly in because you're in that very introspective state, that open-minded state. And having that clarity when I got out of the breathwork workshop, I go, I'm probably not going to do those things that were contributing to my tight jaw and tight chest, or I'm going to know how to shift it. So collecting our personal data can take minutes, and it's so powerful.
Well, it literally dictates like that. Some sort of morning flow, if you incorporate even some, and I do a lot of breath work as well, but just checking in with the body, it literally dictates how the rest of the day is going to go. Because you're going into the day, whether you ask those questions or spend time on checking in or not, you're going into the day with those emotions, whether you realize it or not. And I'd rather have a little bit more agency or control to release some of that stuff and start the day kind of on my own, my own footing, than letting those emotions hijack me, which then lead into, being reactive or your energy's off. And then all of a sudden, you get to the end of the day and you're not sleeping really well because your mind's looping. Like it all stacks, right? It all stacks. Like we have to clear out the mental clutter and the mental debt that just stacks. Like I'm not super proud that our society and the way that we like how we live and how we work with, of course, social media and it gives us a lot of benefit, but we live in a world that is setting us up to fail if we don't have tools. We just can't be on autopilot and have this much change and progress and uncertainty and fear and just expect that as humans we're going to feel great. Like it doesn't equate. It doesn't work. So instead of looking at that from a place of judgment, which I have in the past, and that can lead you in, and there's a lot of research around this, like younger generations, I think 60%, really, there's a new term, it's called eco-anxiety. Like eco-anxiety, fear that the planet is just doomed. Wow. And not wanting to, have kids, not wanting to, they're not self-motivated. And so, because it's like, why everything's just going to go to shit, essentially, which is a real, that's just adding to the stress of everything else. So let's just acknowledge that we have those things happening and put a plan in place, right? Like that's where optimize for the current environment and set ourselves up and make the decision that that's not the way I'm going to, that's not my default operating mode. Because I don't want to become the mental health statistic, which is, over 50% of the population, if not more, is just not doing well. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be like that. This is what I mean by perspective shifts and reading different texts and content. If you read Stoic stuff or history and whatnot, imagine we haven't lived through this, but we're at least where we're recording. Imagine you lived through World War I and World War II, and you and all your friends are going to war, the whole population almost. I mean, that must have been pretty stressful. And years and years worth of war and people losing their lives. I would imagine people would feel like there's no end in sight here. Right, but we forget about those times and think okay, in our current present day, that this is the worst it's ever been. Not necessarily. There's always if you go back to Marcus Aurelius in those times, just literally the whole planet is in some sort of war and whatnot. And he's writing in his journal, one of the most famous books out there, Meditations, is his journal. And when you read that, you can see if you were to update the language for modern day English, it would sound and kind of look and feel very similar to as if you and I were writing our journal today. So but that's just perspective, right? There's still a lot of good. And if we start our day from that perspective, then we can actually put ourselves on a track of, really limitless possibility and opportunity.
So I like the intentionality around shifting your perspective, especially in the morning, because it sets the precedent for your day. It even goes back to where we were speaking on the couch, where you said you need to be intentional with the way you're going to optimize your day for something very specific. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Dive on that just a little bit more.
Yeah, we were talking about my book, Personal Socrates, and just when I was writing that, or at least the tail end of it, I was writing in a location where we are now, where there's a ski hill nearby. And it was around the time I conducted a couple interviews actually with Stephen Kotler, who's well known in flow research. And I remember him telling me when he was writing his books that, if it was ski season or mountain biking season, he'd get himself on the hill. And he would do that and make sure that on the writing days that was worked into his schedule, because the flow state that I think many of us have experienced in sports, or where, and if you haven't in sports, it's where you're so invested in something that time just seems to stop. You have no concept of time. Just time is passing and you're into it, right? Sports is usually an easier one, especially if you're doing something quick or fast. You have no choice but to pay attention and be fully present, or you're going down and you run the risk of injuring yourself. But the benefits of that, those flow states put your mind in a heightened sense of creativity. So, if you have a big, for me, it was a writing project. Obviously, I was writing the first draft of the book, and I would pre-schedule certain days that were dedicated specifically for writing days. And I would make sure that those days, to your point, were optimized for the best writing experience I could, deliver. I can't control everything, but I know that if I can get even an hour out on the hill, first thing in the morning, or I would often split my day up. I'd start, because usually for most people, myself included, the mornings is kind of where you're most creative. There's just less distraction, all of that kind of stuff. So I would start like that. I'd have a quick bite to eat, and then I would try to do something to put myself in a flow state, and then come back almost feeling exactly like I did first thing in the morning. And the science that Stephen shared with me is that heightened level of creativity is seen up to 3 days after you do the activity that puts you in a flow state. So there's tremendous benefit there, even though like we might see it as, and like in today's society of like, well, that's not productive. Like he's like screwing off to go snowboarding or something. Well, actually, like maybe if I didn't do that, I would write nothing, or the quality of what I was writing would not be there, and I have to rewrite that, for example, right? So that's just one example, I guess you can say. And same thing with different podcast interviews and whatnot, making sure. I remember when I had Tony Hawk on the show, like I was doing a lot more breath work. And on the breath holds, I would visualize the experience of going through the interview, of him popping up on the screen and so forth, and just like play that out so that my mind was conditioned to be ready for that interview. And so it's just, setting yourself up with the practices that, for you work well, but anchor them to something.
Anchor them to something. I love that. Anchor them to something. I'm glad you brought up the breaking up the day too. Because you did the morning and then you would do a little bit of I would say later afternoon. I did the exact same thing with my schedule. And the key that I learned was like optimizing and structure. Structure was another great word there. Before, my previous schedule would be wake up at 5:30, hit the gym 6 to 7. I would come home, meditate, and then I would go work on my full time. Then I would go eat dinner. Then I would go work on my other business. And it just, to me, it felt very scattered.
Yeah.
Very unintentional. Yes, I still had some structure, but the structure wasn't optimized.
Yeah.
So now I wake up at 7 and I immediately meditate in a place where my brain is calm. I just woke up, and it allows me to make the meditation much better.
Yeah.
But then I go immediately into work, and then I work and I go to the gym. Same way you just you would do the hill. And then because 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, that's when I start to crash.
Yeah.
That's when the midday kicks in. So why not do something that would energize me?
Yeah.
So I was very intentional with I needed energy. I'm going to put my gym rather than the morning, right in the middle of the day. And then I come back, and then I am able to hit my work session at night, like you said, refreshed. I'm feeling clear, and you know what it's like when you exercise, you get the body moving, this and that.
Yeah.
That optimization of the day and the way I changed my structure, I feel like I have just made more time in a sense.
Of course.
It's crazy to feel like that, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you literally, you essentially, I forget who I picked this up from, but by setting up your days like that, you're almost putting 2 or 3 days into one, in a way.
Interesting.
Because you're breaking it up in the sense of of blocks, and you're so efficient in that. Let's say that morning block, and let's say you take a break and do a bit of a reflection. Because let's back it up. The standard day, let's say 9 to 5-ish or something like that. Someone gets up a little bit earlier. They do their workout. They do their flow or whatever it is. They grind away in the morning. They do their work. They have lunch. They go back into the work and meetings and so forth. The people that have some sort of practices in place might do a bit of a reflection at the end of the day, like what worked, what didn't work. Let's realign our to-do list for tomorrow, something like that, right? And then the day is done. But if we can break it up in the sense of you get up, you have this power hour of like mental fitness, I guess you can say, then combine in your deeper work. And then you take another break and do the workout, and maybe a bit of reflection there. And then you come back at it. Like you're building in what others are doing kind of full 8 hours, compressing it into these like 4 to 5 hour blocks. And you can do like 3 of those, right? I think it's Ed Milet that I heard that on his podcast where he does this. But the key is that it's not just like cramming in more stuff. It's that you're putting in things that are good for your mind and your body, and that you're building in some reflection there. The reflection, again, the insight gathering, right? Like for day one in the entirety of the day, like what went well, what didn't go well, what can I celebrate, i.e. the morning, right? And then your afternoon block, okay, what rocked, what would I have changed? A few minutes of insight gathering. Yeah. So if you do that, and then that stacks and it's exponential.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like what Kobe Bryant was doing with adding in the 4th practice. The team would do a couple practices, and he would add the 3rd and the 4th, and he's like, no one can catch up to my level of skill because of the time I'm putting in. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm.
Very deliberate, though, with the way he's doing that.
Totally.
He understood what his body needed, what his skill set needed, what his game needed, right?
Totally. And it was anchored. This is the part, and I wrote about this in my book in his chapter. His fourth workout, he would get up at 4 a.m. The alarm would go off. He'd be like the rest of us, wants to stay under the warm sheets and stay in the bed. But he had that anchored to, we have to win an NBA championship. I'm leading this team. And I'm pretty sure the context on this one was they had just lost the year before, and he felt responsible because he didn't lead the team properly. So he's like, I'm not going to let that happen again. And he added in that workout. I could be wrong from memory though. That's what's coming up. So it's anchored to something.
I like that term, the anchor.
Yeah, because we negotiate ourselves out of so many things.
Oh, every
so
day.
Easy.
Yeah,
right?
We're very good at that. One thing I do know that is very important, as you have that anchor, let's say you clarified that anchor for any area of your life, having systems in place to carry out that intentional action, that is what I feel is what real optimization is. Because I look at some people who go to the gym. Let's take it in the realm of health and wellness right now. When they show up to the gym, they'll be stretching, they'll do a little bit of bicep curls, then they'll go do some quad extensions, and then I see them crunching abs. Yeah. And they do it in such a very sporadic, spaced out way. And again, it took them a whole hour. Meanwhile, I've done like 6 exercises with the exact reps I need to do. So come into the gym. Imagine if they came in with a system.
Yeah.
I know I have to do warm up, workout, cool down. Let's just take it so basic right now.
Yeah.
That's a system. You come to the gym, you're not going to be scattered wondering, what do I got to do? It makes it easier to show up to the gym, and it makes it easier to find that result because you have a systematized way of doing that workout. And again, applicable to every area of life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also takes, I should say, maintains and gives you more mental energy because you're taking away all of this decision fatigue, right? Let's just use a real practical system that most people operate under. We all have calendars, essentially. So today is a bit of an off day for me. I'm not normally, even though everything's pretty close here, but I'm still not normally traveling somewhere for an in-person podcast. Usually it's virtual. So as you know, in those environments, it's like I can be doing something and then 3 minutes later, I'm in a studio essentially at home recording. Now, we're recording this kind of near lunch time frame or just after. If I didn't block some time to make a quick stop on the way in to grab something to eat, I just wouldn't have eaten. And that's just one small example, but that over time, if I'm doing things like that, where I'm not looking at the calendar system to set me up so that I'm not sitting here and I'm like starving and my mind's thinking like you're going to starve to death, like you need to eat. I do fast as well. It's all good, but you know what I mean? Like, it's just, how can I put myself, and we all are different, so you know yourself, how can I give you and everyone listening and watching the most level of energy and the most level of presence? Well, I don't want to be thinking about food, or I don't want to be thinking about when we're done that I'm going to have to grab something because I'm hungry. Small little things like that. But the only reason it happened is because I allocated some time in the calendar to do that. And that's the system, right? Otherwise, I'm just flying at the seat of my pants like, oh, I just finished this call. Maybe I'll have time to stop. Oh shit, I don't have time actually. So I'm now like, and then the ripple effect of that too is like you're starting to stress, or I would be stressing. And then now I'm arriving kind of frantic because I'm like, oh, I really wanted to eat something, but I didn't. You know, like, so it stacks and it affects things, right? But I only know this of myself because I review my weeks and take time to check in. Like, come Friday of this week, I'll look at everything that was done this week in my calendar, and I'll look at my journal as well as from an emotional perspective and see what was going on and just ask some questions, right? Like, what would I have changed this week? What did I learn this week? And then always finish like, what was awesome about this week, right? Like, I already know that this interaction is going to land there. And then I'm going to relive the feelings of, it was great to meet in person. It was great to connect. Obviously we did this, via Zoom before, but like, it's different as you mentioned, like, excited to see like where the relationship's going to go. So I can like relive this awesome experience again on Friday and finish the week in that positive energy.
I love everything you're saying, Mark. And it makes me think back to kind of the way I used to live my life and how I saw once I implemented those systems, or to take that time to be more in control of my day, That's when I found I started thinking better, I started performing better, and I start my energy level, back to your decision fatigue, started feeling better. I'll give you a great example. A lot of the work that we do in the creative space, if you work 9 to 5, especially if you're on a laptop, even if you, let's do social media too. The way in which we switch context and content very quickly, it almost trains our brain to misfire and work in a very incoherent way.
Yeah.
The term is called popcorn brain, for lack of a better term. So just think like pop thought, oh this, oh that. I found that sometimes when I would even just go about my morning routine, I would try making my bed. And as I walk to the other side of the bed, I find myself opening the window. I got to open it up. And then as I'm still going, I go, oh, let me pick this piece of clothes off the floor and put it in there. And then I'll make the other side of the bed. Meanwhile, I should have made the bed, finished the task. I should have opened the window, a separate task, and then cleaned up my floor, a separate task. But with popcorn brain, not having actual systems to go about even something as simple as doing your room, you're training your brain and your body to operate in a very misfired, miscommunicated way. And I feel like that's such a big factor in terms of anything, like not being able to control your thoughts, not being able to control your actions. It's going to derail you so fast.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things. There's one, this is where if we have some good mental fitness built into our routines, then, you know, if we're doing breath work or in your case, meditation or some journaling and so forth, just over time, you train your mind more and more to be more self-aware. So you catch yourself when you're doing those things more often. And also you just train your mind for presence, right? So that's on one end of the spectrum. The other end is, again, setting up a good system, right? Like, let's use an example that I'm sure everyone can relate to. And I found myself in this recently, and I was like, wow, I can't believe I kind of fell for the trap. You need to do something on your phone, and you open it up, and next thing you know, you forgot what you were doing on your phone, and somehow you're on Instagram or something scrolling, right? So this happened the other day. And it happened because I can't remember, I think I had I changed something with the way my screen was set up on my phone, like the way where the apps were. Because normally my social media apps are 3 swipes deep in my phone in a folder without number bubbles. So like for me to see anything, I've got to swipe 3 times. I got to tap into a folder, and then I might see something. So it's just a small fail safe to not get pulled into those apps for specifically. And then the first screen on my phone is all related to health and well-being. There's meditation apps, there's breathwork apps, there's journals and things like that. And then the main screen that I have is just work-related things. And I think WhatsApp's the only thing that has a number bubble. Everything else is there are no notifications there. So that's the system, right? So if you do on one side, there's the system. On the other side, you're also training your mind and giving yourself the tools to be more aware, to catch yourself in that moment. And for me, thankfully, I did catch myself. I was pissed that I got that far, but I wasn't scrolling for like 15, 20 minutes kind of thing. I was like, why am I here? I've got to get back. So if you're working both sides, then you're just giving yourself a better shot to do the things that you want to be doing, right? And B, not living in that like what you said, like that popcorn state of mind, which is exhausting.
It's reactive,
It's exhausting. And like, I can't remember what the science is. I want to say it's 20 to 30 minutes it takes to get to reorient to get you back to where you were in terms of like a dialed in state. If you're working on a task, it's something like 20 to 30 minutes to get back there. So it costs you a massive amount of productivity. And I think that's where the science is coming from, is that at one point, like multitasking was celebrated, right? And then they started to do the research and like, well, actually, it's really not a good thing.
Yeah. You know what? There's one thing that I want to point out there. The way that you said you have to swipe for your social media apps 3 times. There's a concept in psychology called the path of least resistance. You're probably familiar with this. Basically, and if you're looking at habitual behaviors and you want to make a habit as easy as possible, set it up with the least path of resistance to get there. Yeah. Think about how easy it is to turn on Netflix. What do? Boom, say into the mic, Netflix, and then it's opened up. Why do you think it's engineered that way? It's designed so that you have there's no barrier for you to start consuming that platform.
Yeah.
Same thing with Instagram, same thing with your phone, same thing with everything. So you did it the exact opposite to remove a negative habit. You put more resistance to get towards that, and maybe, I don't want to say negative behavior, but not as a productive behavior.
Totally.
So as you build in systems, think about where in your life you can make the path of least resistance possible for you. I'll give you one example from my life with healthy eating. I'm a busy guy. Cooking is very time consuming. So to make the process as easy as possible throughout the week, all my veggies are chopped on Sunday.
Yeah.
All my grains, whether it's quinoa, whether some brown rice, it's already done. So that way I can just warm it up quick in the microwave. I don't have to boil anything. And it makes my decision much easier to make a healthy food rather than saying, I'm either going to skip or I'm going to go out and eat.
Yeah, you're going to pick something up. Yeah, totally.
It's a huge concept for sure.
Yeah. I think this is a great journaling exercise that I'd invite everyone to try out. Like, just on one side, take a 2-page spread, and on the left side, write out all of the habits or the things that you want to change, for example, and take a look at each of them. And to your point, just map out or reflect on like how you can make it harder, right? Like, I know for social media, a lot of people literally will delete the apps off their phone, and only, you can only log in through your computer, or they're there and you log out every time on your phone. So it's not easy. Like, it's a little bit of work to go into them, right? But look at everything that you're trying to do, like eating and so forth. Like, get rid of all the garbage in your house. Like, just don't have that stuff there, so it's not there. But then on the right side of the page, write out the things that put your mind and your body in a good state and that are supporting, again, that person that you're trying to be, and do the opposite, right? Set up, like for me on the exercise front, the night before I'll go into the Peloton app and I'll pick something. So not that I'm not going to do it in the morning, but I know that I'm going to get up and it's done. I'm just clicking on that and firing because maybe I didn't sleep well. I don't feel great. Again, we can like negotiate ourselves out of something so easily. Be like, I'll do it later. Later never happens. The day catches up. But just that small little task that takes seconds the night before. Now, to your point of like this path of least resistance, I just open it up, fire it up. I'm on the bike. I'm doing weights, whatever. Right?
Yeah.
But do that for everything. Like, just take a few minutes to take inventory of the habits you want and the habits you don't want, and then just set up a system to break them, or set up a system to amplify them.
I love that. And I'm actually going to add another cherry on top to the habits you want and you don't want. I'm very big into the psychology behind habits. Like, we were almost going to make a video program called Habit Reversal here at Revive. So I'm deeply entrenched in just seeing how humans work. A lot of the times we can't break a bad habit, even if we set up those path of like the most resistance, right? You remove the junk, you deleted the Instagram app. What we'll find is, because your brain is seeking that dopamine hit. Yeah. If that habit or that vice is not there anymore, it will find something else that is also going to give you the same dopamine hit. So a great example is, let's say you removed Instagram from your phone. All of a sudden, you're starting to snack on more chips lately. Yeah. Right? Your problem wasn't the chips before, but now that it wants that dopamine, it wants that hit. So yes, set up that path of least resistance. But as you take that inventory of habits, find out which more of those beneficial habits that your future self would love is going to give you that same dopamine hit. Yeah. We can get dopamine from so many other beneficial things, but we just go to the junk food or we go to the Instagram app because it's easy. It's a fast dopamine hit, and we know that. But if you set up those habits that you really want, those habits that will give you that really good dopamine hit that's more natural, organic, and beneficial, and it's path of least resistance, you are so much it's so much easier to step into that future version of you. I think it's a big distinction there. Understand what's driving your dopamine choices. Yeah. Well, and I'd go another level deeper on that is flip the page in that journal and start asking why you have those. There's the dopamine hits, but there's something behind that. There's usually a reason why you're reaching for the unhealthy choice, because there's typically some sort of level of, it makes you feel comfortable or comforted or safe or something. Well, what's driving that behavior? That's when you start, and that's where you can start stacking these kind of practices. If you're doing a meditation or some breath work, then jump into the journaling, because now you're going to start asking questions and surfacing answers that are 5-6 steps deeper than the typical surface level stuff. And you'll realize that, well, I'm just going on Instagram because I want to see what people are doing.
I want to prove that I'm doing something of value. Like there's all of these scripts and narratives that are running in our heads. There's always a reason. If you start breaking down the source of it, right, then we really make some serious change. But that's a big step, right? Obviously. So like I think first, more realistic is to just subtly adjust our environment internally and externally with these systems and habits and whatnot, and at least get to a place where it feels like we're making good progress. Then we can unpack that a little bit more.
I like that. And just for listeners' sake right now, like what we're talking about is that data. That's the data we're collecting. And that's the information you're going to use to habit stack. That's the information you use to take action. Yeah. So that was like a really good concrete example I want listeners to be aware of in this episode. And that's phenomenal, Marc. I really do appreciate that there. Now, I want to know, in terms of the generation as a whole, though, where's your perspective on this? Because I know a lot of us, we really struggle to implement things. We really struggle to stay consistent. Where do you feel most of us are living so out of alignment? Is it a certain habit that we're doing? Is it something that we're kind of succumb to in our day and age? What pushes us most out of alignment with who we want to be and how to stay consistent with that?
That's a big question. Outside of spending some time on really understanding who we do want to be, like us, not our parents, not society, but like, who do you want to be, right? And that depending on what stage of life you're in, that might be linked to career and stuff like that you might not have super clear answers to if you're younger and so forth. So then I would start with questions around like, how do I want to feel? And, what would light me up? Like you've got clues to the things that give you joy and whatnot, right? So just assuming that you've done some of that reflection, I think the biggest challenge is that if we continue the example around nutrition, we don't nourish our mind really at all, frankly, or very little, and we fill it with processed food, let's say, or food-like substances, which is fear-based headlines, social media, all of that stuff, because we're surrounded by it. We don't filter for it for the most part. So it's nearly impossible then to escape all of the looping narratives. Like I said, if you're on the autopilot of the machine, then you could have all of these healthy practices, but then you spend 10 minutes, looking at fear-based stuff, and it throws you off. And it takes 3 positives to outweigh a negative from a science perspective. So we've got to over-index that. But it's typically the reverse right now, right? So I think the biggest thing that we can do for ourselves is not to like stick our head in the sand and not know what's going on, but be intentional with it. That I'm only going to read the newsletter update, and that goes for knowledge stuff as well. Like you can only consume so much before you've got to start doing something with that. So then maybe it's once a day, and I wouldn't say in the morning because that's when you're probably your most creative and dialed in. Like maybe it's mid-afternoon where you say, I'm going to do 30 minutes of just catching up on things. But then I would bookmark that at the end and do a gratitude practice or do some breath work or do some push-ups, like move the body, like something to counteract the fact that you're going to get hit with things that are probably not good for your mind. So just doing that. Like I remember when we were running the app, my job was... when you would know this, like when you're a smaller team, like your job is like you have all jobs, right? So one of mine was to respond to the app reviews. Now, like anyone listening or watching probably can make the assumption that because you've been on the other side, like people don't often leave good reviews. They're usually bad reviews, or they've got like hung up on something, and people are like nasty on the review side of things. And I remember the first time I did it, I went through it and it's like, I was just wrecked. It felt like, because we're like putting our heart and soul into this app and spending a good amount of money, our own money, and all this energy, and someone will come back and be like, I can't believe they didn't put this in. And you're like, oh, it's just like, it can never be enough, right? So I went through that process once and was just really like deflated for the whole day. And then realized that like, well, I can't keep doing this. Like it's not going to work. So I started saving all of like the reviews where like this this app, this question like changed my life, or all the good stuff, right? And I would have that on a separate page. And after I was done the reviews, I'd always go back to those positive ones and like reset or reorient my mind so that I was in a thriving state instead of that survival state of like, I'm not enough, like we didn't do enough, and all this fear, like, okay, if people keep writing this, like, of course we're going to have to shut this down, all of that kind of stuff, right? So it's the same thing with content. It's just we have to be super conscious. Just like if you walk into a supermarket, if you have no intention and you haven't thought about what you're going to get, you're coming out influenced purely by marketing with a bunch of garbage in your cart. Mm-hmm. Right? Like you're not coming out with just fruits and vegetables. You're coming out with all the center aisle stuff because it looks good and you have no plan, right? Or you don't have the higher level plan of I'm fueling my body for this, the anchor again, right? Yeah. So same thing with our minds. And I think that's where we're struggling the most because we've never been so connected from a technology standpoint, which has a bunch of benefit, but we have to be more intentional with how we consume and when we consume.
Well, even the reset that you said there at the end of a task that maybe would have put you in a more frazzled state, more fearful, anxious state, that reset, and you're looking for the reasons that things are good. It's that gratitude effect. And I've talked about this on the podcast a lot of the times. It's called the Tetris effect with psychology. Have you heard of this?
No.
Okay. Really cool, and it's really relatable to what you just said about how you're training your mind to look for those the positive things. Okay.
Yeah.
So Tetris, what happens when you play Tetris? A shape comes down.
Yeah.
The only thing you're looking for on that app at that moment is a place where it's going to fit. You're not looking at whether it's green or yellow. You're not looking at the time on your phone. You're looking at where that thing's going to go. So the Tetris effect is saying you're training your mind based on what you focus to be either in an abundant or a very negative state.
Yeah.
The gratitude is amazing for the abundant state because you're looking for all the great reasons. But it's the same reason that lawyers have a high divorce rate, number one, stress, of course, high work hours, but they're trained to look for the flaws in a contract. Who's to say they're not looking for flaws all the time in their relationships, romantic and platonic? The Tetris effect is coming in again. Had they reset after every contract they did or every case that they did, they would now shift their mind from that fearful, anxious, judgmental to a more positive, uplifting, grateful perspective. Yeah. And that influence on your emotion, not only just your mind, but your emotion to take action and optimize your day and continue out, that could be, you can elevate your energy. Your performance can be better. You're operating from this place of like vitality rather than what you said, I would say draining almost.
It's draining, yeah. Well, and the other thing too is you get to the end of the day with energy left. Right? Like if you're consciously doing these things throughout the day, then like we shouldn't finish the day feeling completely like we have nothing left. I mean, I don't think that's fair for your friends, your family, your loved ones, like whoever is getting the back half of your day. It's like, oh, great, thank you. Like you've got nothing left, which is what I see most often when working with teams. It's like they're barely getting through the day, right? And then they wake up and they dread going into work because there's just like, where do I start? Right. And there are none of these kind of routines. So I think that's probably another point, kind of going back to your question, is there was a period in the corporate world where companies would just like give every employee a gym membership kind of thing, which is great. But if you don't know what to do at the gym, or you have you're starting from zero, that's not helpful. And I see the same thing happening with like, oh yeah, all of our team members have a subscription to Calm. Awesome. Who's using it? Like less than half, if that. Okay, well, so you're paying for all of that. Like, let's get people speaking about what is mental fitness and how can we work it in? How can we integrate it into our working days? When all these companies are having status calls, well, why don't we start the status calls with 2 minutes of breath work together? Just clear out the mind. You're doing it weekly anyway, and your status call is going to go from rushed and busy to probably a little bit deeper and, oh yeah, I didn't think about this, and people are calmer. And so it's just like, that's one example of thousands that just takes minutes. And I think that's where, and it's starting to change. I mean, obviously there's companies that I'm working with and others, I can see that they're adopting these kind of things. But I think we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I want to ask you, Mark, as we get into kind of the ending of this episode here, let's say somebody wants to start optimizing their life, but some people want to optimize their sleep. Some want to optimize nutrition. They want to optimize their fitness, even sometimes just their mental fitness. Because we're on the health podcast here, what would you say would be a great first step for somebody to optimize any area of their life? Let's keep it broad, but kind of specific at the same time.
Well, the question that comes to mind is, what area in my life would give me the biggest return for my investment when it comes to spending some time optimizing for it, right? And taking a look at the most important buckets of your life, because health, like obviously health can be broken down, and there's your mental health, there's your relationship health, there's your nutrition health, your physical health, your spiritual health. There's a lot of buckets there, and just seeing what intuitively makes most sense to focus on first for you to start. Because as you know, once you start, then it starts to snowball, right? Like you start to feel like, when your mind's feeling good, then, okay, well, you probably have a little bit more intuitive power and willpower to like, yeah, I'm going to go to the gym. I want to keep this going. And then you do that, then it stacks and it's like, okay, well, I put in this effort this morning. I'm not going to go through the A&W drive-through. Like it's going to like moot the whole workout or zero it out. Right. So then you start eating a little bit healthier. Then, wow, like I'm feeling a lot better. I'm more clear. Like it just continues to stack. Right. So, but we have to start somewhere, and we like to see results and we like to feel the results. So I would look at things that, because we're smart people, like, if you put effort in a certain area, whether you're going to see benefits right away or it's going to take some time. And I've gone through this as well around mental fitness, where I know the benefits of meditation, but I know it takes a little bit more time than if I do a round of breath work, it's immediate for me. So in certain circumstances, I'll go to the breath work because I know I'm going to get that hit right away, and it's going to put me in the state for whatever, whether it's recording a podcast or writing or something like that, or about to jump on a stage. Like I know that if I breathe in a calming way, it'll settle the nerves, and I'll just have the right amount of nerves to go up in front of an audience or whatever it is, right? But on a consistent basis, I want to continue to meditate because I know it's literally rewiring my mind as well. So it's just taking inventory and taking some time to think about these things and setting yourself up on a path to success.
Yeah, and you're using your own data. You were literally referencing your own data for the choices you were saying in that beautiful monologue there. I even want to just tack on one thing there with people saying, well, I can't just pick one thing. Like it won't move the needle. I want to fix all these different areas. What you're saying is scientifically proven. I got this out of The Power of Habits by Charles Duhigg. Have you read that book?
Yeah.
That's a great book. And he calls it a keystone habit. It's probably a term you're familiar with. Mm-hmm. But he would take studies and he would tell people like, okay, we're just going to walk around the block today for 10 minutes. That's all you're going to do.
Yeah,
that's it. And then over the study, they would start exercising more. They would get better food. They started using their credit cards less. They started smoking less. So it's literally scientifically proven to snowball in the exact same way you were saying. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands picking one thing, but doing it well will allow yourself to make better choices, step into that version of you much more seamlessly.
Yeah. Well, but the thing is, like, I mean, I work a lot, obviously, in business environment, and probably a lot of people listening are working on it for a company or something like that. So you see this stuff play out day in and you can't do everything on a brand, right? Mm-hmm. If there's only so much time and energy, and we've all been there where you try to do too much and then nothing happens, right? Versus focusing on one thing and like you really move the needle, then you see the results, and we plan out full brand plans over a course of a year to 3 years with key milestones, because we can't do all of that and they stack together. So it's the same, like, take a look and don't wait until the end of the year. Just do it now. Take a look at where you are right now and put a loose plan that can evolve together for the next 12 months, starting now. And be like, okay, well, for the next 4 weeks, I'm going to focus on this. And then we're going to check in with ourselves, see how it goes, what I've changed, what worked, and so forth. And then next month, maybe I'll add in this. And then you have a plan, and you can feel like, as humans, the most happy humans from the research that I've seen are the ones that feel like they're making progress every day. Even small amounts of progress, doesn't matter the context, just progress. And setting up a plan like that automatically sets us up to feel the progress along the path, right? And then we're ready. Like we put ourselves in a mental and physical state to be ready when shit hits the fan, or what we're experiencing in the world in general, like rapid change and innovation, which is fantastic, but it's change and uncertainty that we just don't do well with. So now we're training ourselves to stay ready, just like an elite athlete. You know, if you're physically fit, and you are obviously, like someone, you may not be a marathon runner, but if a friend comes up and says, "Hey, I'm going to do this 10K," you can probably do it, right? It might not be the thing that you're going to want to do, but there are many people that literally physically could not even come close to doing that. And we can do the same thing with our minds, to stay ready. Like, oh, okay, I can handle that. Like that's a stressful situation that the vast majority of the population just will buckle and burn out. Whereas if you're trained and you're focused on your mental fitness and all of the things that are attached to that, your health and so forth, then you can handle these things.
That's beautiful, Marc. And I want to put a pin in the conversation right there, just to wrap it up, because that was a beautiful testament to everything we spoke about and actually manifesting it physically in the real world. So I want to give you the stage before we wrap up this recording. Where can listeners find you? Where can they connect with you if they want to keep up with some more content?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this was so fun. We could obviously go for a lot longer. It's the vibe is good. I keep it really simple. The website is behindthehuman.com. Podcast is there. The socials are there. The work that I do, book, everything is in one spot. So flip over. And the one thing I would just ask, just as a collective kind of service announcement, I guess you could say, is share this episode and share a question that has helped you in your life, really in tough moments, that have, helped you pivot your perspective or something like that, so that we can reshare that, because there's someone on the other side that needs that question right now. And if we can all collectively collaborate together, then we can really do a lot of good.
That's awesome, Marc. No, man, I appreciate you coming on the episode. It's so great to connect in person. And again, thank you for sharing your insight on the Revive Effect.
Thank you.